1,000 Miles Up the Nile, Section 12. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 1,000 Miles Up the Nile by Amelia B. Edwards. Chapter 4, Sakkarah and Memphis, Part 3. Apart from these and one or two other mannerisms, nothing can be more natural than the drawing, or more spirited than the action, of all these men and animals. The most difficult and transitory movements are expressed with masterly certitude. The donkey kicks up his heels and brays, the crocodile plunges, the wild duck rises on the wing, and the fleeting action is caught in each instance with a truthfulness that no land-seer can distance. The forms, which have none of the conventional stiffness of later Egyptian work, are modeled roundly and boldly, yet finished with an exquisite precision and delicacy. The coloring, however, is purely decorative, and being laid on in single tints, with no attempt at gradation or shading, conceals rather than enhances the beauty of the sculptures. These, indeed, are best seen where the color is entirely rubbed off. The tints are yet quite brilliant in parts of the larger chamber, but in the passage and courtyard, which have been excavated only a few years and are with difficulty kept clear from day to day, there is not a vestige of color left. This is the work of the sand, that patient laborer whose office it is not only to preserve but to destroy. The sand secretes and preserves the work of the sculptor, but it effaces the work of the painter. In sheltered places where it accumulates passively like a snowdrift, it brings away only the surface detail, leaving the undercolors rubbed and dim. But nothing, as I had occasion constantly to remark in the course of the journey, removes color so effectually as sand which is exposed to the shifting action of the wind. This tomb, as we have seen, consists of a portico, a courtyard, 2 chambers, and a sepulchral vault. But it also contains a secret passage of the kind known as a serdab. These serdabs, which are constructed in the thickness of the walls and have no entrances, seem to be peculiar to the tombs of the ancient empire, i.e., the period of the Pyramid Kings, and they contain statues of the deceased of all sizes in wood, limestone, and granite. 20 statues of Ti were here found immured in the serdab of his tomb, all broken save one, a spirited figure in limestone, standing about 7 feet high, and now in the museum at Bulak. This statue represents a fine young man in a white tunic, and is evidently a portrait. The features are regular, the expression is good-natured, the whole tournure of the head is more Greek than Egyptian. The flesh is painted of a yellowish brick tint, and the figure stands in the usual hieratic attitude, with the left leg advanced, the hands clenched, and the arms straightened close to the sides. One seems to know Ti so well after seeing the wonderful pictures in his tomb that this charming statue interests one like the portrait of a familiar friend. How pleasant it is, after being suffocated in the Serapeum and broiled in the tomb of Ti, to return to Mariette's deserted house, and eat our luncheon on the cool stone terrace that looks northward over the desert. Some wooden tables and benches are hospitably left here for the accommodation of travelers, and fresh water in ice-cold cullahs is provided by the old Arab guardian. The yards and offices at the back are full of broken statues and fragments of inscriptions in red and black granite. 2 sphinxes from the famous avenue adorn the terrace, and look down upon their half-buried companions in the sand hollow below. The yellow desert, barren and undulating with a line of purple peaks on the horizon, reaches away into the far distance. To the right, under a jutting ridge of rocky plateau not 200 yards from the house, yawns an open-mouthed, black-looking cavern shored up with heavy beams and approached by a slope of debris. This is the forced entrance to the earlier vaults of the Serapeum, in one of which was found a mummy described by Mariette as that of an Apis, but pronounced by Bruges to be the body of Prince Khaemous, governor of Memphis and the favorite son of Ramses the Great. This remarkable mummy, which looked as much like a bull as a man, was found covered with jewels and gold chains and precious amulets engraved with the name of Khaemous, and had on its face a golden mask, all which treasures are now to be seen in the Louvre. If it was a mummy of an Apis, then the jewels with which it was adorned were probably the offering of a prince at that time ruling in Memphis. If, on the contrary, it was the mummy of a man, then, in order to be buried in a place of peculiar sanctity, he probably usurped one of the vaults prepared for the god. The question is a curious one, and remains unsolved to this day, but it could no doubt be settled at a glance by Professor Owen. Far more startling, however, than the discovery of either Apis or jewels was a sight beheld by Mariette on first entering that long-closed sepulchral chamber. The mine being sprung and the opening cleared, he went in alone, and there, on the thin layer of sand that covered the floor, he found the footprints of the workmen who, 3,700 years before, had laid this shapeless mummy in its tomb and closed the doors upon it, as they believed, forever. And now, for this afternoon is already waning fast, the donkeys are brought round, and we are told that it is time to move on. We have the site of Memphis and the famous prostrate colossus yet to see, and the long road lies all before us. So back we ride across the desolate sands, and with a last long wistful glance at the pyramided platforms, go down the territory of the dead into the land of the living. There is a wonderful fascination about this pyramid. One is never weary of looking at it, of repeating to oneself that it is indeed the oldest building on the face of the whole earth. The king who erected it came to the throne, according to Manetho, about 80 years after the death of Mena, the founder of the Egyptian monarchy. All we have of him is his pyramid, all we know of him is his name. And these belong, as it were, to the infancy of the human race. In dealing with Egyptian dates, one is apt to think lightly of periods that count only by centuries, but it is a habit of mind which leads to error, and it should be combated. The present writer found it useful to be constantly comparing relative chronological eras, as, for instance, in realizing the immense antiquity of the Sakkarah pyramid, it is some help to remember that from the time when it was built by King Onephus to the time when King Khufu erected the Great Pyramid of Giza, there probably lies a space of years equivalent to that which, in the history of England, extends from the date of the conquest to the accession of George II. And yet Khufu himself, the Cheops of the Greek historians, is but a shadowy figure hovering upon the threshold of Egyptian history. And now the desert is left behind, and we are nearing the palms that lead to Memphis. We have, of course, been dipping into Herodotus. Everyone takes Herodotus up the Nile, and our heads are full of the ancient glories of this famous city. We know that Mena turned the course of the river in order to build it on the very spot, and that all the most illustrious pharaohs adorned it with temples, palaces, pylons, and precious sculptures. We had read of the great temple of Ptah that Ramses the Great enriched with colossi of himself, and of the sanctuary where Apis lived in state, taking his exercise in a pillared courtyard where every column was a statue, and of the artificial lake, and the sacred groves, and the obelisks, and all the wonders of a city which even in its later days was one of the most populous in Egypt. Thinking over these things by the way, we agreed that it is well to have left Memphis till the last. We shall appreciate it the better for having first seen that other city on the edge of the desert, to which, for nearly 6,000 years, all Memphis was quietly migrating, generation after generation. We know how poor folk labored, and how great gentlemen amused themselves, in those early days when there were hundreds of country gentlemen like T, with town-houses at Memphis and villas by the Nile. From the Serapeum, too, buried and ruined as it is, one cannot but come away with a profound impression of the splendor and power of a religion which could command for its myths such faith, such homage, and such public works. And now we are once more in the midst of the palm woods, threading our way among the same mounds that we passed in the morning. Presently those in front strike away from the beaten road, across a grassy flat to the right, and the next moment we are all gathered round the brink of a muddy pool, in the midst of which lies a shapeless block of hardened black and corroded limestone. This, it seems, is the famous prostrate colossus of Ramses the Great, which belongs to the British nation, but which the British government is too economical to remove. So here it lies, face downward, drowned once a year by the Nile, visible only when the pools left by the inundation have evaporated, and all the muddy hollows are dried up. It is one of two which stood at the entrance to the great temple of Ptah, and by those who have gone down into the hollow and seen it from below in the dry season, it is reported as of a noble and very beautiful specimen of one of the best periods of Egyptian art. Where, however, is the companion colossus? Where is the temple itself? Where are the pylons, the obelisks, the avenues of sphinxes? Where, in short, is Memphis? The dragoman shrugs his shoulders and points to the barren mounds among the palms. They look like gigantic dust heaps, and stand from 30 to 40 feet above the plain. Nothing grows upon them save here and there a tuft of stunted palm, and their substance seems to consist chiefly of crumbled brick, broken potsherds, and fragments of limestone. Some few traces of brick foundations and an occasional block or two of shaped stone are to be seen in places low down against the foot of one or two of the mounds, but one looks in vain for any sign which might indicate the outline of a boundary wall, or the position of a great public building. And is this all? No, not quite all. There are some mud huts yonder, in among the trees, and in front of these we find a number of sculptured fragments, battered sphinxes, torsos without legs, sitting figures without heads, in green, black, and red granite. Ranged in an irregular semicircle on the sward, they seem to sit in forlorn conclave, half solemn, half ludicrous, with the goats browsing round and the little Arab children hiding behind them. Near this, in another pool, lies another red granite colossus, not the fellow to that which we saw first, but a smaller one, also face downwards. And this is all that remains of Memphis, eldest of cities, a few huge rubbish heaps, a dozen or so of broken statues, and a name. One looks round and tries in vain to realize the lost splendors of the place. Where is the Memphis that King Mena came from Thinis to find, the Memphis of Onophus and Khufu and Khafra, and all the early kings who built their pyramid tombs in the adjacent desert? Where is the Memphis of Herodotus, of Strabo, of Abd el-Latif? Where are those stately ruins which, even in the Middle Ages, extended over a space estimated at half a day's journey in every direction? One can hardly believe that a great city ever flourished on this spot, or understand how it should have been effaced so utterly. Yet here it stood, here where the grass is green and the palms are growing, and the Arabs build their hovels on the verge of the inundation. The great colossus marks the site of the main entrance to the temple of Ptah. It lies where it fell, and no man has moved it. That tranquil sheet of palm-fringed backwater, beyond which we see the village of Mitrahina and catch a distant glimpse of the pyramids of Giza, occupies the basin of a vast artificial lake excavated by Mena. The very name of Memphis survives in the dialect of the Fellah, who calls the place of the mounds Tel Monf, just as Sakkarah fossilizes the name of Sakkari, one of the special denominations of the Memphis Osiris. No capital in the world dates so far back as this, or kept its place in history so long. Founded 4,000 years before our era, it beheld the rise and fall of 31 dynasties. It survived the rule of the Persian, the Greek, and the Roman. It was even in its decadence second only to Alexandria in population and extent, and it continued to be inhabited up to the time of the Arab invasion. It then became the quarry from which Fustat was built, and as the new city rose on the eastern bank, the people of Memphis quickly abandoned their ancient capital to desolation and decay. Still a vast field of ruins remained. Abd el-Latif, writing at the commencement of the 13th century, speaks with enthusiasm of the colossal statues and lions, the enormous pedestals, the archways formed of only 3 stones, the bas-reliefs and other wonders that were yet to be seen upon the spot. Marco Polo, if his wandering taste had led him to the Nile, might have found some of the palaces and temples of Memphis still standing, and Sandys, who in A.D. 1610 went at least as far south of Cairo as Kafr el-Ilat, says that up the river for 20 miles space there was nothing but ruins. Since then, however, the very ruins have vanished. The palms have had time to grow, and modern Cairo has doubtless absorbed all the building material that remained from the Middle Ages. Memphis is a place to read about, and think about, and remember, but it is a disappointing thing to see. To miss it, however, would be to miss the first link in the whole chain of monumental history which unites the Egypt of antiquity with the world of today. Those melancholy mounds and that heron-haunted lake must be seen, if only that they may take their due place in the picture gallery of one's memory. It had been a long day's work, but it came to an end at last, and as we trotted our donkeys back towards the river, a gorgeous sunset was crimsoning the palms and pigeon towers of Bedrashen. Everything seemed now to be at rest. A buffalo, contemplatively chewing the cud, lay close against the path and looked at us without moving. The children and pigeons were gone to bed. The pots had baked in the sun and been taken in long since. A tiny column of smoke went up here and there from amid the clustered huts, but there was scarcely a moving creature to be seen. Presently we passed a tall, beautiful fellow woman standing grandly by the wayside, with her veil thrown back and falling in long folds to her feet. She smiled, put out her hand, and murmured, "Bakshish." Her fingers were covered with rings, and her arms with silver bracelets. She begged because to beg is honorable and customary and a matter of inveterate habit, but she evidently neither expected nor needed the bakshish she condescended to ask for. A few moments more and the sunset has faded. The village is left behind, the last half-mile of plain is trotted over. And now, hungry, thirsty, dusty, worn out with new knowledge, new impressions, new ideas, we are once more at home and at rest. End of section 12.